Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here, and this is the last lecture out of the textbook. So it's been a great semester, and I appreciate working with everybody. So in this last chapter, chapter 9, we sort of get into modern Europe. So we're sort of at the end of Western civilization, which in our periodization ends like in the 1600s, early 1700s. So in the last chapter, chapter 8, we saw really Christianity change with the Reformation and a new focus on the secular, the individual. So not only was the individual stressed after the Reformation with secularism, but we're also starting to see in chapter 9 a different form of government. So, religion changed after the Reformation, and governments begin to change away from this medieval model into really the more modern nation state that we know today. So, Western Civ, we really talk about the main countries that we still know of today. So, England, of course, Spain, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and this last chapter, chapter 9, kind of tells us how all of these things came together. So, Spain was really dominant under Ferdinand and Isabella in the 1400s and really got into this phase of expansionism where they started to expand their territories, fought a lot of wars, were very intolerant of Jews and also Muslims, and Spain was under Muslim control prior to that time. So when you read about Spain, you read about an empire that was expanding under Ferdinand and Isabella. They get involved in a family way with the Habsburgs in Austria and really expand their empire, but it's an empire that they can't keep hold of because they're expanding too quickly, and they really don't have any domestic revenue coming in. But what does come out of it, of course, is Christopher Columbus, the era of Spanish exploration into the New World. So Spain had enough power during this time for colonization and exploration, and certainly we can relate to that today, being in the United States, being in the Americas. So Spain's a fascinating read, and it's really, it's this monarchy that gets too powerful too quick, doesn't build up any domestic economy whatsoever, and financially just isn't supported. The same kind of thing happens in France. So in France, under the reign of really Louis XIV is really probably the best place to start. Louis XIV has absolute power. So when you talk about absolutism, as far as monarchies go in this period in Europe, you have to talk about France because Louis XIV, builds Versailles, lives very lavishly. Again, they go on a binge of expansionism throughout Europe, and same thing with Spain. Really, that the economy is what eventually brings Louis XIV down, but Louis XIV survives until like 1715, and after his death, that's kind of when all the trouble starts and leads up to the French Revolution in 1789. Again, just like the Spanish model, France expanded really quickly. They needed money to fund their various wars and their various imperialist aspirations, but can't support the country. And really, France is a little bit different because the French colonization it was there, but not to the extent of the Spanish as far as exploration goes. Then finally, you're going to read about England under the Tudor Empire. So you'll read about Henry V, Henry VIII, and this idea of the Church of England, but also the difference between England and France and Spain is that England is really ruled by a strong parliament. So parliament's always there. So this notion of absolutism really isn't as intense in England as it is in France or as in Spain. The other thing that happens in England is that capitalism takes hold. They really build up an industrial base, so they have this economic base that supports the country quite well. And they go through a couple of revolutions, but they're the glorious revolution, if you will, not bloody civil wars like ours, but revolutions where power is wrestled between the monarchy and parliament, and England ends up in this sort of modern democratic parliamentary system which they operate under today. So England really in this time period, as far as a economic powerhouse, industrial powerhouse, and really the country that dominates the world after this, with colonization in England and in Asia, and the colonies of the United States. The English economy booms and allows England to fund exploration and colonization and exploitation, I would argue, throughout the world during this time. So that's kind of how all of these things stack up. I guess the only other thing we should address, but it's not a complete story where we end, is the Holy Roman Empire, which think in terms of Germany and Austria, but it really doesn't come together until later. There's just too many competing powers in that area for it to really gel. So when we leave this era, the Holy Roman Empire is still in place, but it's really Germany and Austria and Hungary to some extent that hasn't formed yet. So that's kind of where we leave it when we finish this chapter in the late 1600s, early 1700s. The bottom line really is, in this time period between 1400 and 1700, we really see individualism and the nation state rise and really get more into modernity as we know it today in modern Europe. The other thing that happens is that just as secularism takes over religion, this notion of sort of the individual, that also happens with the economy. So these intrinsic economies grow and market capitalism takes over, which is really the system we operate under today. So this idea that there are a lot of merchants, there are a lot of craftsmen making money on their own, and the economy starts to grow really on sort of a microeconomic scale, which is a good thing because it means that all regions are producing. There's producers and consumers just like there is today, and these economies start to grow, and we get into this modern system of taxation, which is really similar under what we live in today. But capitalism as an economic form is really an individual type system rather than command and control communism or socialism when you look at economic models. So the point is that just as religion has become individualized during this period, the economic system has become individualized as well, if that makes any sense. So that's it for chapter 9. It's a great chapter, and I think it really kind of caps off everything we've looked at this semester, going all the way back from the Greeks and the Roman Empire all the way forward. I will have another lecture for the final exam. The final exam is most likely going to be multiple choice and a culmination of a little bit from every chapter that we've already read. So more to come on that. If I don't talk to you again, have a great rest of the semester. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I hope to see you again real soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.